The morning air in Boston felt sharper than usual as I stood in the student waiting area at Killian Court, gown brushing against my ankles, graduation cap trembling slightly in my hand. MIT banners fluttered overhead, a sea of crimson and gray. My phone buzzed. "Mom." I answered, expecting a quiet good luck whisper. Instead, loud music, clinking glasses, and a microphone echo burst through the speaker. "Honey, where are you?" "We're at Ethan's big investor brunch. Everyone's here." I closed my eyes. "Mom." "I'm at Killian Court, my MIT graduation. I've reminded everyone for 7 months." A pause, then her voice, sugary and strained. "Oh, we thought your ceremony was live stream only? We'll watch later." Today is a big day for Ethan's company. All the investors flew in. And that's when it hit me they didn't forget my graduation. They planned to miss it. And that day, I decided to erase their name from mine and from my future. Hi, I'm Lena. And this is how my parents chose my brother's investors over my MIT graduation and how changing my name changed everything. I didn't fully understand the weight of that phone call until much later, but as I stood there in my MIT gown, something inside me cracked open a memory, a pattern, a truth that had been forming my entire life. To explain why that moment mattered so much, I need to take you back to where everything began, Orange County, California. From the outside, our family looked like a glossy magazine-spread Mediterranean-style house with a manicured lawn, 2 Teslas in the driveway, and parents who carried themselves like a power couple who had everything under control. People loved to say we were the perfect tech family. They didn't know perfection was my parents' favorite product to manufacture. My dad used to be an engineer, the type who actually loved building things before he discovered that building an image created better returns. Years ago, he co-founded a small tech venture, then poured every ounce of energy into turning it into a family enterprise. But instead of empowering all 3 of their children, my parents chose a single heir, my older brother, Ethan. They handed him the CEO title of the family startup before he was even ready for real responsibility. And then, as if they were shaping a prophecy, they began speaking about him everywhere at dinners, at fundraisers, at holiday parties as the brilliant dropout destined to become the next Elon Musk, but less controversial. Ethan dropped out of a competitive computer science program after 1 year. He said college slowed down his genius, and my parents applauded the line like it was Shakespeare. They built him a startup, a smart property platform that was supposed to revolutionize housing, though most of the code was written by contractors Dad hired behind the scenes. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the story, and my parents told it with religious devotion. Ethan became their golden boy, their ticket into investor circles, their living proof that they were a visionary family raising the future of tech. Then there was my younger sister, Chloe, the eternal princess. She grew up believing she was born for ring lights and curated attention. She wasn't a celebrity, but with the right angles and enough filters, she convinced herself she was public figure adjacent. Mom backed her completely, showering her with cameras, sponsored outfits, and endless praise. Every family dinner involved updates on Chloe's follower count, brand deals, or which wedding venue she was manifesting for someday. Her accomplishments were soft and sparkly, but in our house, sparkle was everything. And then, there was me. The middle child. The quiet one. The girl who preferred gears, circuits, and code over human theatrics. I loved robotics competitions more than parties, algorithms more than aesthetics, and the logic of AI more than the logic of social hierarchies. My room was filled with disassembled hardware, textbooks, and notebooks scribbled with ideas I was too shy to share. But in a house where visibility equaled value, my silence turned me invisible. I didn't inherit their obsession with appearances, and for that, I became the background character in my own family story. What happened at MIT wasn't sudden, it was the culmination of a lifetime of small cuts. And the strange thing about small cuts is that you don't notice when they start bleeding until you finally look down and realize the wound never healed. One of the earliest memories that still burns vividly in my mind is from the State Robotics Championship when I was 15. I had spent months building a fully autonomous rover from scratch, writing every line of code, soldering every joint, designing a navigation algorithm that made my advisor raise his eyebrows in impressed disbelief. On the day of the final competition, I waited by the bleachers, scanning the crowd for my parents. They had said they would try to make it, depending on Ethan's schedule. That was the first red flag, but I was too young to notice. When the judges announced I had won first place, the gym exploded in applause. Cameras flashed. My teammates lifted me off the ground. And for the smallest fraction of a second, I let myself look toward the doors, imagining Mom and Dad bursting in late, teary-eyed, proud. But they never came. I found out later through an Instagram story that they were at a private demo session Ethan was giving to a handful of investors in a rented co-working space. He didn't even have a product yet, he had a mock-up and a dream. But that was enough to make them choose him over me. It wouldn't be the last time. By senior year of high school, I had learned to lower my expectations. I poured myself into my classes, my robotics team, my AP courses. I wasn't chasing validation from my family anymore. I was chasing escape. Becoming valedictorian wasn't about impressing them, it was my ticket out of the spotlight they refused to let shine on me. The night of graduation, I stood at the podium, lights blinding me, rows of proud parents standing to record their kids' speeches. I saw my mom and dad in the front row, smiling momentarily. Halfway through my speech, I saw them whisper to each other. Mom glanced down at her phone, eyes widening. Chloe had just hit 1 million followers on her video. Moments later, they stood up quietly, mouthing, "We're so proud, sweetie," and slipped out of the auditorium. By the time my classmates' parents rushed forward with flowers and hugs, my parents were already home preparing a celebratory dinner not for my graduation, but for Chloe's milestone. My high school diploma ended up propped against a vase of roses on the kitchen counter like an afterthought. Chloe's achievement became the centerpiece of the night: balloons, champagne, a cake with 1M piped in gold frosting. Someone asked her how it felt to beat the algorithm, and I remember listening from the couch thinking, I just finished 12 years of school with top honors, and somehow I'm still the least interesting person in the house. College only deepened the pattern. I earned a full scholarship to one of the top computer science programs on the West Coast. Most families would have been ecstatic. Mine treated it like a footnote. At family dinners, the conversation always rotated between Ethan's seed round drama and Chloe's follower engagement strategy. My research, my internship interviews, my AI lab projects all slipped into silence the moment I opened my mouth. Ethan would interrupt with a new fundraising update. Chloe would squeal about a potential brand partnership. And my parents? They would nod vigorously at everything except me. One Thanksgiving, when I started telling them about a breakthrough I'd been working on with my advisor, an early version of an energy optimization model, I barely got through 2 sentences before Mom waved her hand, smiling the way people do when they're humoring a child. "That's nice, honey," she said, reaching for the wine bottle. "But you know investors don't care about research, they care about stories." I remember freezing with my fork halfway to my mouth. Ethan smirked. Chloe flipped her hair and said, "Yeah, like, no offense, but research is kind of boring content." And that moment, more than any trophy or diploma, carved itself into my spine. It taught me the core rule of survival in my family. Data didn't matter. Achievements didn't matter. What mattered was shine, and I had never been their shiny child. Still, I kept working. Because what else does the invisible child do except cling to the things she can control? My projects became my refuge. My lab became my home. Professors encouraged me in ways my parents never did. I learned how to publish, how to collaborate, how to build things that mattered even if no one in my family cared. During my junior year, while Ethan was hosting pitch nights in overpriced bars and Chloe was filming unboxing videos in the living room, I was presenting at undergraduate research conferences, flying alone to other states, paying for my flights with prize money from coding competitions. Mom would tell her friends, "Lena's busy with school stuff," but she never asked what that school stuff meant. She didn't need details. Details didn't fit into the brand narrative of the William family. Every once in a while, usually when an investor asked if both daughters were in tech, my parents would remember I existed academically. "Oh yes, Lena studies computer science," Dad would say casually, as if mentioning the weather. Then the conversation would pivot back to Ethan. Always back to Ethan. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't just that they overlooked me, it was that they had pre-decided my role. In their minds, I was never meant to be the star. I was the support beam, the background, the proof that the family had range. Ethan was the visionary. Chloe was the beauty. And I? I was the quiet overachiever they dusted off when convenient. For years, I accepted it. I told myself I didn't need their applause. I'd convinced myself that being invisible was better than being scrutinized. But deep down, something much sharper was forming, a quiet resentment, a bruise that grew every time they dismissed my work, every time they chose someone else's moment over mine. And by the time I got into MIT, that bruise had become a scar. A scar I carried all the way to Boston. A scar that would finally split open the morning they chose Ethan's investors over my graduation. Because in that moment, I realized the truth I had been trying to ignore for my entire life. In my family, brilliance meant nothing unless it sparkled. And I was never allowed to sparkle. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly predict, was that the quiet girl they overlooked was learning something far more powerful than they ever taught their golden children. I was learning how to walk away. The day the acceptance email arrived from MIT is a moment I can replay in perfect clarity. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor of my dorm room, half-finished problem sets scattered around me, when my laptop pinged with a notification from admissions@mit.edu. My breath caught. My hands shook. I clicked. And just like that, a world I'd only dared to imagine opened wide in front of me. "Congratulations. We are pleased to offer you admission to the Master PhD program in Artificial Intelligence for Sustainable Systems." For a long moment, I just stared. Not because I doubted my own work. I had spent years preparing for this, carving myself into someone who could build, solve, innovate. But because I knew exactly how my family would respond, and I was right. When I told my parents, they gasped, but not the way I had imagined growing up, not with awe, not with genuine pride, not with that warm, bone-deep joy parents feel when their child achieves something extraordinary. No. Their excitement came from somewhere else entirely. Mom clasped her hands dramatically. "MIT? That sounds incredible for investors. Just imagine the credibility. Our daughter is at MIT, we're a real tech family now." Dad laughed, slapping Ethan on the back. "See? We told everyone our kids were destined for greatness. This will boost our image like crazy. Investors love pedigree." Pedigree. Image. Investors. Not one word about my research. Not one question about what I would study. Not one moment spent acknowledging the years of sacrifice, the endless nights, the competitions I attended alone. They saw my acceptance as a badge for the family brand, not a door I had broken open through sheer force of will. Only one person sat down beside me, gently taking my hands in hers. My grandmother, my mother's mother, the only person who had ever seen past the noise of my family, past the glitter of Ethan and Chloe, past the walls I built around myself. Grandma Ward was the opposite of my parents. A retired school teacher, painfully honest, fiercely tender in a way that made you feel seen all the way down to your bones. She came to my room that afternoon, carrying a plate of lemon cookies and 2 mugs of tea. She lowered herself onto the edge of my bed and asked, without theatrics, "Tell me, child, what exactly will you be researching at MIT?" I blinked. No one had asked me that yet. So I told her haltingly at first, then with growing excitement. I talked about the challenges cities face with energy grids straining under climate change, about the opportunity to build AI systems that redistribute water and electricity in real time, reducing waste, stabilizing overloaded networks, protecting communities. I told her how a single algorithm could save millions of gallons of water, how predictive modeling could prevent blackouts during heat waves. How this field wasn't glamorous, wasn't flashy, but it mattered. She listened intently, her brows gently furrowed the way they always did when she was absorbing information like a sponge. Then she cupped my cheek. "Lena," she whispered, "this is real work. Work that touches lives. Not everything important needs to sparkle, remember that." "Lena." A beat passed. Then she added the sentence that would one day reshape everything. "If they don't see you, child, one day you'll have to change the room, not yourself." I didn't fully understand it then, but it lodged in my chest like a seed. A quiet truth waiting for the right season. When I left for Boston, my parents held a goodbye dinner not for me, but for the photo op. They took pictures with me in front of the house, made captions about sending our MIT daughter off to change the world, and forwarded the images to their investor group chats. They waved as my taxi pulled away, already turning back inside before I disappeared around the corner. Boston was cold when I landed, sharp, bracingly honest. Unlike California, where everything was softened in sunlight and illusion, Boston demanded sincerity. The campus overwhelmed me at first, Killian Court rising like a stone sentinel, the Charles River glittering under gray skies, the hum of brilliant minds everywhere I turned. MIT was everything I'd hoped for and everything my family had never cared to ask about. The coursework was brutal, the expectations relentless. But for the first time, I felt part of a system where my work wasn't invisible, where excellence wasn't overshadowed by someone else's vanity. I wasn't competing with siblings who never understood what I did. I was collaborating with peers who spoke the same language, who knew the joy of debugging at 3 a.m., who understood the thrill of a model finally converging after days of failure. My parents never visited Boston. Not once. But they mentioned our daughter at MIT in every networking brunch they attended back home. I only found out because someone posted a clip on LinkedIn of my mother bragging about our family's academic branch. My phone remained quiet otherwise. No calls, no real check-ins, no interest in my life unless it involved something they could brag about. Meanwhile, I buried myself in my research: AI-powered infrastructure, algorithms for water redistribution, energy optimization, predictive climate modeling. It was the opposite of Ethan's flashy smart property concept. This wasn't sexy tech. This was quiet innovation, the kind that saved cities, not sold headlines. Some nights, I worked so late I saw the sunrise glint off the Charles. Some nights, I sat alone in the lab staring at code that refused to cooperate. Some nights, I reread Grandma Ward's letters, her handwriting slanted and delicate, reminding me that my work mattered even if no one else in my family understood it. But the pattern followed me, even from afar. Whenever I told Mom about a research milestone, she would respond with something like, "That's nice, honey. But investors don't care about research. They care about stories. Maybe try making your work sound more exciting." As if the climate crisis needed a better marketing plan. As if substance meant nothing without shine. Her words etched themselves deeper each time, turning into a mantra of everything my family valued: aesthetics over ethics, attention over intention, stories over science. But while they talked, I built. While they sparkled, I studied. While they chased applause, I chased solutions. And slowly, the seed my grandmother planted began to grow. Because while my parents used my MIT status to polish their image, I was learning something far more dangerous to their hierarchy. I was learning that I didn't need them. And I was learning that the world outside our family didn't just see me. It valued me. It valued what I built, what I thought, who I was. I didn't know it then, But this was the quiet beginning of my rebellion, not loud, not dramatic. Just steady. I was becoming someone who no longer needed their spotlight. Someone who would one day walk out of their narrative entirely. Someone who would change her name and build a future they would never be able to claim. By the time my final year at MIT began, I already knew I couldn't expect much from my family, but I still tried. Hope is a stubborn thing, especially when you've spent your whole life starving for the smallest crumbs of attention. So in October, 8 months before commencement, I did everything in my power to make attending my graduation effortless for them. I forwarded the official MIT email with the commencement schedule, bolding the date and time. June 3, Killian Court, 10 a.m. Then, because I knew how conveniently my family forgot things that weren't about Ethan or Chloe, I created a separate group chat titled Mick Commencement, Lena's Graduation. Before I even added them to the chat, I pinned the message with the location, time, parking details, and a short note that made me cringe as soon as I sent it. Would love to see you all there. This moment means a lot to me. I booked a block of hotel rooms months in advance, using my student discount, and sent them the booking codes and flight deals I found from LAX to Boston. I even checked which airlines still had refundable fares so they'd have no excuse about commitments. I mapped out the whole thing like a logistical engineer, removing every barrier before it even existed. Mom responded first, hours later, in the tone she used whenever I asked for something that wasn't convenient for her. "We'll try, honey, depends on Ethan's Series B timeline." My dad followed with, "Proud of you, kiddo, Mom handles the calendar." I stared at the messages, my chest tightening. "We'll try" was a familiar phrase in my family. It never meant they would try. It meant they wouldn't. It was a placeholder, a cushion to protect their image as supportive parents while placing the actual responsibility on timing, schedules, business needs, anything but their priorities. Still, some part of me kept hoping they had 8 months. Surely they could spare one morning. Then came the real blow. 3 months before graduation, while I was in the lab debugging a stubborn model, a notification popped up from the family group chat. It was a poster, glossy and color-saturated, showing Ethan in a tailored suit, arms crossed like he was posing for a magazine cover. Above his head, in bold gold lettering, Ethan Tech Investor Showcase and Brunch, June 3, Los Angeles Beverly Pavilion Hotel. My stomach dropped. Below the poster was Ethan's message. Biggest event of our year. Investors flying in from all over. Mom's helping with planning. Going to be huge. I stared at the date again, making sure my eyes weren't playing tricks. June 3. Morning. Exactly the time I had repeated to them for months. I typed slowly, forcing my hands not to shake. That's the exact morning of my MIT graduation. I watched the little scene indicator appear under Mom's name. Then nothing. No reply, no clarification, no apology. Just silence, heavy, deliberate, choking. Hours later, Mom finally called me privately. Her voice was soft, overly gentle, the same tone she used whenever she wanted me to behave like the understanding daughter. "Sweetheart, we'll figure something out. Maybe your dad can fly out to Boston, and I stay here with Ethan. Or, we all watch your ceremony on live stream. Honey, it's the same thing." The same thing. A live stream. As if the years I spent breaking myself open to succeed, the nights alone in the lab, the sacrifices, the triumphs, they could be reduced to pixelated squares on someone's phone while they sipped mimosas under chandeliers in Los Angeles. I swallowed hard, gripping the edge of my desk. "Mom, it's not the same thing." She sighed, the annoyed kind of sigh she thought I couldn't hear. "We're juggling a lot, Lena. You know how important this is for the family. All the important people will be at Ethan's event. It's a once-in-a-lifetime shot for the company." There it was. The truth tucked inside the justification. They had chosen already. But they needed a graceful excuse, a narrative they could cling to if anyone asked. That they mixed up the dates, that time zones confused them, that business emergencies got in the way. Anything except the truth. They believed Ethan's future was worth showing up for, and mine wasn't. Over the next weeks, signs piled up like snow outside my dorm window in winter. Mom stopped mentioning my graduation entirely. Dad never brought up flights or logistics. Ethan sent links to articles about his event, tagging Mom, but never me. Chloe posted stories about dress fittings and photo ideas for the brunch, asking her followers which earrings she should wear. Nobody asked about my thesis defense. Nobody asked about the award my advisor nominated me for. Nobody asked how I felt about finishing a 5-year program that had nearly eaten me alive. My grandmother noticed. She always did. She called me one evening after dinner. "Your mother seems busy with your brother's event," she said carefully. "Have they confirmed flights?" I hesitated, then whispered, "No. I don't think they're coming." There was a long pause on the other end. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but steady. "Child, sometimes people show you their truth long before you're ready to see it." I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. "But they should come. It's graduation. It's MIT. They should," she agreed softly. But should and will are different things with people who cannot see past their own reflection. Her words lingered with me for weeks. I wish I could say I was surprised when the final month arrived and no one mentioned booking flights. I wish I could say it hurt less because I had anticipated it, but expectation does not dull betrayal. If anything, it sharpens it. Because there is a specific kind of ache in knowing they did not forget. They simply chose not to come. I could feel it, the careful choreography of their avoidance. The vague replies, the silence in the group chat, the emphasis on Ethan's once-in-a-lifetime event. They weren't going to say it outright. That would make them the villains in their own story. They needed plausible deniability. A time zone mix-up. A scheduling miscommunication. A last-minute emergency. These were the doors they were leaving open not for my sake, but for their reputations. And as I watched everything fall into place, the investors, the brunch, the hotel venue, I realized something cold and final. They weren't failing to show up. They were preparing for the moment they wouldn't. They were choosing Ethan. And they wanted just enough distance from that choice to pretend they hadn't. I felt the shift. The fracture. The quiet breaking inside me. Graduation was still weeks away, but I already knew I'd be walking across that stage alone. And for the first time, a part of me whispered, maybe that's exactly what I need. Commencement morning in Boston arrived clear and sharp, the kind of morning that makes the Charles River look like polished silver. I woke before my alarm, heart thudding, nerves tightening beneath my ribs. For a long moment, I just lay there, staring out the window of my tiny graduate housing room as early sunlight crawled across the riverbank. Today was supposed to be the culmination of 5 years of sacrifice, discipline, loneliness, breakthroughs, burnout, and rebuilding. Today was supposed to feel like victory. I slipped into my worn MIT hoodie, the one with coffee stains and frayed cuffs, the one that had been with me through every all-nighter in the lab. I held it against my chest for a moment before changing into my gown, smoothing the folds with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Outside, the campus buzzed, students laughing, faculty straightening regalia, families rushing around with cameras and bouquets. At 8 a.m., someone knocked violently on my door. "Open up, Dr. William." Maya's voice burst through, bright as always. When I opened the door, she nearly tackled me with a hug. Behind her were her parents, each holding something, her mom with a bouquet of sunflowers tied in a crimson ribbon, her dad with a hand-painted sign that read, "Congrats, Dr. William," in shaky lettering that told me he'd made it on the plane. "You didn't have to," I began, voice cracking. "Oh, yes we did," her mom said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like peppermint gum and wool coat fabric. "No one gets a PhD alone." I swallowed hard. No one from my family had even texted good morning. As we walked toward Killian Court, I saw everyone else surrounded by their people, dads with cameras, moms adjusting mortarboards, siblings waving homemade signs. The lawns were dotted with picnic blankets and proud smiles. The air buzzed with a kind of joy that had weight to it, a communal warmth I felt only from two borrowed parents and one best friend who knew the shape of my loneliness better than anyone. Before lining up with the other graduates, I stepped aside and pulled out my phone. I told myself this would be the last time I tried. The very last. My fingers hesitated over the call button for my mother. I pressed it anyway. On the first ring, the sound of clinking glasses, thumping music, and the echo of a microphone flooded through the speakers. A man's voice and MC boomed in the background. Please welcome the visionary founder of Ethan Tech, the one and only Ethan William. Cheers erupted, a tide of applause. Mom answered breathlessly. Honey, where are you? It's so loud here I can barely hear you. I closed my eyes. Mom, I'm at Killian Court. Graduation starts in 20 minutes. Ender. There was a disorienting pause. Sweetie, we thought your thing was tomorrow. The time zones. It's all confusing. She forced a laugh, the brittle kind she used when she was lying. I didn't reply. I simply listened. And in the background, carried by the microphone's echo, came Ethan's unmistakable voice, but this time without a filter, without a narrative, without the polish my parents always wrapped him in. Don't make me look bad with the investors, Mom. We agreed. Agreed. My blood ran cold. Mom's voice scrambled in panic. I didn't tell him it was today. He'd be so hurt if we left now. You know how sensitive he is. And that was the moment, not a metaphorical one, not a dramatic realization, but a clean, surgical cut of truth that I finally saw their choice for what it was. They hadn't forgotten. They hadn't mixed up dates. They hadn't been confused by time zones. They had decided, together, to prioritize Ethan's event and to leave me an escape hatch where they could pretend it was all an honest mistake. They chose him. They always had. Today was simply the day they stopped pretending otherwise. I lowered the phone, not even sure whether she was still talking. I ended the call without a word. When I joined the procession line, my legs felt heavy, as if someone had tied sandbags around my ankles. Maya slipped her hand into mine, squeezing gently. Whatever happens, she whispered, you're not alone today. But when I stepped into Killian Court, the sight of it nearly gutted me. Rows and rows of seats stretched out under the open sky, filled with cheering families, waving balloons, clapping hands. Professors walked past, smiling proudly at the graduates they'd shepherded through years of impossible work. And then I saw it. The row reserved for my family, 5 seats, marked carefully with my name, stood completely empty. 5 seats. 5 invitations. 5 open chances. All abandoned. My heart folded in on itself, a quiet implosion. I walked toward the seats, but Maya's parents hurried ahead of me, settling themselves on either side of my row. Her mom grabbed my arm gently. Sweetheart, we'll keep these seats warm for your family. Her dad lifted the video camera. We'll record everything. Don't you worry. Maya stood behind me with her hands on my shoulders, anchoring me in place as my vision blurred. All around us, families erupted into applause as names were called. My advisor found me in the crowd and gave me a firm nod, eyes softening with unspoken sympathy when he noticed the empty seats. As I took my place for the procession, a voice threaded itself through my mind, steady and numb. I am graduating in front of thousands of strangers, and the people who share my blood chose to stand in a conference hall 3,000 miles away. When my name was finally called, Dr. Lena Marie William, Ph.D. in Artificial Intelligence for Sustainable Infrastructure. The applause from the crowd washed over me like static. But what I heard most clearly was the silence in those 5 empty seats. And that silence was the sound of something breaking for good. After the ceremony, after the robe was folded and the cap tucked away, Maya and her parents guided me to a small restaurant just off Mass Ave. A cozy place with brick walls, handwritten menu boards, and tiny vases of wildflowers placed thoughtfully on each table. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt warm. Real. The kind of place where you could breathe after having your heart crushed in public. We slid into a corner booth, and before I could protest, Maya's dad lifted his glass of sparkling cider. To Dr. Lena William, he announced proudly, eyes shining. The smartest person at this table and probably the smartest one in this entire zip code. Maya clinked her glass against mine with a grin. To surviving MIT, she added. And to better families than the ones we were born into. I laughed, but it was thin, the kind of laugh that echoes against something hollow inside you. Still, the warmth of their celebration wrapped around me like the first real hug I'd had all day. But then my phone began vibrating. Once. Twice. A third time. The screen lit up with messages, each one chipping away at the thin veneer of calm I was trying to hold. From Mom. We're so proud from afar. Send us the recording. From Ethan. Hope graduation went well. Investors loved the event. Big turnout. From Chloe. Your cap looked cute on Insta. When you come back, help me edit my brand video, okay? Love you. Not congratulations. Not we're sorry. Not, we should have been there. Just. Convenience. A summary. A request. A PR-friendly line. For them, my graduation was not a moment. It was content. I placed the phone face down on the table. Maya saw the tension in my shoulders and didn't ask. Her parents didn't pry. They simply let me be, talking about music and Chicago weather and what they'd do tomorrow before their flight home. I let the conversation wash over me like a balm, and for a moment, I pretended the ache wasn't there. But that night, back in my dorm room, when the laughter had faded and the adrenaline had run dry, the silence became heavier than ever. I sat on my bed in the dim yellow glow of my desk lamp, opened my laptop, and typed into the browser. Massachusetts legal name change. The page loaded instantly. Petition forms. Filing fees. Court appointment scheduling. ID update requirements. My eyes scanned every detail, absorbing them the way I absorbed code methodically, analytically, like I was debugging the last piece of a system that had been failing for years. One tab turned into 5. Passport updates, Social Security forms, California DMV policies, employment verification procedures. I wasn't acting out of rage. Rage is loud and impulsive. This was something quieter, steadier. I felt like I was stepping into a new algorithm, one where I finally rewrote the variables. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out the shoebox where I kept the letters my grandmother Ward had sent me over the years. Her handwriting was slanted, soft, always ending with a looping signature. I sifted through until I found the one I was seeking, a letter she'd written when I first moved to Boston. Her voice echoed in my head as I reread it. When a name becomes a cage, you're allowed to put the key down. That sentence hit differently now. Back then, it was only metaphorical, a reassurance. Tonight, it felt like permission. I thought about the 5 empty seats. The lies about tomorrow. The sound of Ethan saying, "We agreed." The realization that even at the biggest milestone of my life, I had been optional. And for the first time, something in me snapped into clarity. I didn't want to carry their name anymore, not the name they used for investor bragging rights, not the name they used to decorate the facade of a perfect tech family, not the name they only remembered when it polished their brand. I wanted a name that had held me when I cried, a name that had believed in my work, a name that had never once used me as a prop. Ward. My grandmother's name. The only person who saw me before the world did. I opened the form and typed. Requested new name, Lena Marie Ward. The letters looked right. Solid. True. The next steps came naturally. I drafted a new email for professional use, Sel Word at, instead of Sel William at. I requested a new MIT alumni ID. I contacted HR at a Seattle deep tech firm Aurora Systems that had offered me a position months earlier. They specialized in AI infrastructure for urban resilience, exactly the kind of work that made my pulse steady and my brain spark. I accepted the job. I deleted my old social accounts, closed the family group chats, changed my phone number, migrated all my GitHub repositories and research profiles under Dr. Lena Ward, archived every photo with my parents in it. With each deletion, each update, each form submitted, it felt like stitching up a wound I had ignored for too long. When I finally shut my laptop, it was nearly 3 a.m. I lay back on my bed, listening to the faint hum of the building's heater, the distant noise of students celebrating in the courtyard. My chest still hurt, but differently now, cleaner, sharper, purposeful. I whispered into the darkness, not to my family, not to the world, but to myself. I'm done being invisible. And then, softly, like a quiet vow, I'm done belonging to people who never showed up. In my voiceover, if my life had one, it would say, I didn't leave my family in anger. I left with the same precision I used to write my dissertation at MIT. Every step deliberate, every choice intentional, every door closed on purpose. And with that, the girl named Lena William disappeared. A new woman, Dr. Lena Ward, took her place. Seattle didn't just give me distance, it gave me air. The kind you don't realize you've been deprived of until you breathe it for the first time and feel something inside your ribcage unclench. When I arrived with 2 suitcases and a newly minted identity, the sky was its usual muted gray, the skyline a mix of glass, cranes, and mountains. It felt nothing like Orange County. And that was exactly what I needed. Aurora Systems was smaller than the giants in Silicon Valley, but it radiated purpose. There were no egos stomping through hallways, no glossy facades, no investors posing for photos next to founders who hadn't built their own prototypes. The people here were like me, quiet, intense, obsessed with building things that mattered more than the noise around them. In my first year, I worked harder than I had even at MIT. But it was different this time. The late nights came from exhilaration, not desperation. My colleagues weren't competitors, they were collaborators. My ideas weren't swallowed into silence, they triggered brainstorming sessions, whiteboard sketches, debates that lasted until the cleaning crew politely asked us to move so they could vacuum. By year 2, I had become Aurora's principal engineer, leading a team developing an AI-driven infrastructure system that monitored energy waste in real time across entire districts. It integrated predictive climate models, citizen usage patterns, and municipal grid data. We called the project PulseNet, a living nervous system for cities, designed to prevent the collapses that climate change was already accelerating. And when a global urban innovation fund reviewed our pilot in Tacoma, they didn't just approve it, they invested in it. In us. In me. But the biggest shift wasn't professional. It was internal. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. At Aurora, when I walked into a room, people turned toward me, not away. When I pitched an idea, people listened. When I made decisions, they held weight. No one asked me to make things shinier or more exciting. They asked how to implement them. They asked how they could help. My team respected me. My colleagues trusted me. And somewhere in that second year, in a meeting room bathed in late afternoon light, I realized I had become something new. Someone with authority, someone with gravity, someone whose name belonged entirely to herself. Someone whose name was Ward. And because I understood intimately what it felt like to grow up in the shadow of louder, flashier people, I started something on the side, just a small idea at first. The Ward Fellowship for Invisible Innovators. A grant, mentorship, and micro-funding program for students and early-stage founders who were like me, brilliant but overshadowed, diligent but dismissed, creative but unsupported by the very people who should have believed in them. No interviews where someone asked, "What does your family think of your work?" No bias toward charisma over substance. No obsession with pedigree. Just raw innovation. Just talent that deserved light. The first year, we supported 8 fellows. The second year, 23. Some of them cried during their acceptance calls. One said, "This is the first time someone's taken me seriously." Their tears felt eerily familiar. As for my personal life, I built something quieter and steadier than anything I'd ever experienced. I formed a small circle of friends, engineers, urban planners, researchers, people who liked cooking dinners in cramped apartments, hiking on weekends, arguing about the ethics of AI over ramen at 1 a.m. They didn't know about my past at first. When I eventually told them, not one person minimized it. They didn't call me sensitive. They didn't tell me to forgive. They didn't tell me family was everything. They just listened. Eventually, I also found companionship something soft, respectful, unexpectedly healing. They were a systems engineer with a gentle laugh and an uncanny ability to sense when I needed space or when I needed someone to sit silently beside me while I typed furiously on my laptop. They never once made me feel like I should dim my ambition to soothe someone else's ego. Meanwhile, my past remained exactly where I left it, behind me. But sometimes, late at night, I checked LinkedIn quietly, secretly, like peeking into a world I no longer belonged to but hadn't fully let go of. Ethan posted constantly. Thrilled to announce our upcoming series Be Conversations. Honored to be featured in Top Tech Visionaries Under 35. Excited for new partnerships. Every photo had the same performative smile, the same staged energy. But if you knew what to look for, the inconsistencies, the subtle pauses, the increasingly vague announcements, it wasn't hard to notice what was really happening. The company wasn't growing. It was struggling. Badly. Their burn rate was too high, their product development lagged. Their patents hadn't been renewed, their manpower was increasingly outsourced. Their investor pool was thinning. Ethan was dressing up a sinking ship with better lighting. Sometimes, Dad appeared beside him in group photos, listed as an executive advisor. Mom appeared at panel events wearing perfectly chosen outfits, chatting animatedly with investors, her smile stretched just a little too tight. Their online presence clung desperately to the image of a thriving family enterprise. But underneath, the shine was fading. I didn't feel vengeful. I didn't feel triumphant. Mostly, I felt nothing. Or maybe I felt relief because the distance between us had grown into a chasm so wide that their failures no longer dictated my self-worth. Their choices no longer rewrote my story. Their absence no longer carved holes in my life. Seattle had rewired me. Aurora Systems had rebuilt me. The Ward Fellowship had anchored me. I was no longer the invisible daughter. I was no longer the shadow in someone else's narrative. I had become a whole person, grounded, present, and unmistakably seen. The irony, of course, was that the more I rose, the closer I came to a confrontation I didn't ask for and didn't avoid. Because fate, or maybe irony, or maybe poetic symmetry, was about to place me in front of the very people who had erased me for years. And this time, I would not be the one fading into the background. This time, they would see me. It happened on a Wednesday morning, the kind of morning that felt ordinary in every way, right up until the moment it wasn't. I arrived at the office early, the Seattle sky still draped in its usual pale gray, carrying a cup of too hot coffee and a list of tasks crowded in my head. I wasn't expecting anything remarkable. I wasn't expecting them. I sat down at my desk, logged into my email, and there it was. Subject, upcoming pitch, Ethan Tech, California. For a moment, my brain refused to process the words. I blinked, leaned closer, and read again. Ethan Tech, California, applying for the Ward Innovation Grant and Pilot Project Partnership with Aurora Systems. Introduced by Global Urban Innovation Fund. My breath hitched. The same global fund that had invested in us, the same fund I had been working closely with on municipal AI initiatives, had recommended them. My family. My brother's company. His struggling, overly polished, deeply underperforming startup. I clicked open the pitch deck attachment. My fingers trembled just slightly, an echo of an old reaction I thought I had rewired out of my system. And there it was. Ethan's face. That same confident smirk, that same tagline, revolutionizing smart infrastructure for the future. Slides filled with buzzwords, inflated claims, unrealistic deployment schedules. And at the center of their proposed pilot, an AI-powered infrastructure optimization model. No interviews where someone asked, "What does your family think of your work?" No bias toward charisma over substance. No obsession with pedigree. Just raw innovation. Just talent that deserved light. The first year, we supported 8 fellows. The second year, 23. Some of them cried during their acceptance calls. One said, "This is the first time someone's taken me seriously." Their tears felt eerily familiar. As for my personal life, I built something quieter and steadier than anything I'd ever experienced. I formed a small circle of friends, engineers, urban planners, researchers, people who liked cooking dinners in cramped apartments, hiking on weekends, arguing about the ethics of AI over ramen at 1 a.m. They didn't know about my past at first. When I eventually told them, not one person minimized it. They didn't call me sensitive. They didn't tell me to forgive. They didn't tell me family was everything. They just listened. Eventually, I also found companionship something soft, respectful, unexpectedly healing. They were a systems engineer with a gentle laugh and an uncanny ability to sense when I needed space or when I needed someone to sit silently beside me while I typed furiously on my laptop. They never once made me feel like I should dim my ambition to soothe someone else's ego. Meanwhile, my past remained exactly where I left it, behind me. But sometimes, late at night, I checked LinkedIn quietly, secretly, like peeking into a world I no longer belonged to but hadn't fully let go of. Ethan posted constantly. Thrilled to announce our upcoming series Be Conversations. Honored to be featured in Top Tech Visionaries under 35. Excited for new partnerships. Every photo had the same performative smile, the same staged energy. But if you knew what to look for, the inconsistencies, the subtle pauses, the increasingly vague announcements, it wasn't hard to notice what was really happening. The company wasn't growing. It was struggling. Badly. Their burn rate was too high, their product development lagged. Their patents hadn't been renewed, their manpower was increasingly outsourced. Their investor pool was thinning. Ethan was dressing up a sinking ship with better lighting. Sometimes, Dad appeared beside him in group photos, listed as an executive advisor. Mom appeared at panel events wearing perfectly chosen outfits, chatting animatedly with investors, her smile stretched just a little too tight. Their online presence clung desperately to the image of a thriving family enterprise. But underneath, the shine was fading. I didn't feel vengeful. I didn't feel triumphant. Mostly, I felt nothing. Or maybe I felt relief because the distance between us had grown into a chasm so wide that their failures no longer dictated my self-worth. Their choices no longer rewrote my story. Their absence no longer carved holes in my life. Seattle had rewired me. Aurora Systems had rebuilt me. The Ward Fellowship had anchored me. I was no longer the invisible daughter. I was no longer the shadow in someone else's narrative. I had become a whole person, grounded, present, and unmistakably seen. The irony, of course, was that the more I rose, the closer I came to a confrontation I didn't ask for and didn't avoid. Because fate, or maybe irony, or maybe poetic symmetry, was about to place me in front of the very people who had erased me for years. And this time, I would not be the one fading into the background. This time, they would see me. It happened on a Wednesday morning, the kind of morning that felt ordinary in every way, right up until the moment it wasn't. I arrived at the office early, the Seattle sky still draped in its usual pale gray, carrying a cup of too hot coffee and a list of tasks crowded in my head. I wasn't expecting anything remarkable. I wasn't expecting them. I sat down at my desk, logged into my email, and there it was. Subject, upcoming pitch, Ethan Tech, California. For a moment, my brain refused to process the words. I blinked, leaned closer, and read again. Ethan Tech, California, applying for the Ward Innovation Grant and Pilot Project Partnership with Aurora Systems. Introduced by Global Urban Innovation Fund. My breath hitched. The same global fund that had invested in us, the same fund I had been working closely with on municipal AI initiatives, had recommended them. My family. My brother's company. His struggling, overly polished, deeply underperforming startup. I clicked open the pitch deck attachment. My fingers trembled just slightly, an echo of an old reaction I thought I had rewired out of my system. And there it was. Ethan's face. That same confident smirk, that same tagline, revolutionizing smart infrastructure for the future. Slides filled with buzzwords, inflated claims, unrealistic deployment schedules. And at the center of their proposed pilot, an AI-powered infrastructure optimization model. My mother blinked rapidly, her face draining of color. My father's hands curled into fists on the table. Ethan looked as though someone had hit him with a data breach alert in real time. But I remained standing, composed, hands resting lightly on the back of my chair. Dr. Ward on the outside, Lena on the inside. Both finally aligned. The board chair cleared her throat. If you three need a moment. No, I said gently but firmly. We'll continue. This is a professional meeting. My parents flinched at the word professional, as if suddenly aware of how completely the power dynamic had flipped. They were no longer the hosts. They were applicants. And I was not their daughter here. I was the gatekeeper. I turned back to the committee. Before I give my technical recommendation, I need to address a conflict of interest. My mother leaned forward desperately. Honey, wait. I held up a hand. They're my biological family. A murmur swept across the table. But, I continued, I have been estranged from them for years. My legal name is Dr. Lena Ward. They were unaware of my involvement in this process. Then, I looked directly at my parents. And I was unaware they were applying. Another flicker of shock crossed their faces. The chair nodded. Given that, you're still permitted to provide technical input, though the committee will make the final vote. Of course. I folded my hands. Let me explain. I turned fully toward my family, my voice steady, clinical, but not cold. When I walked across the graduation stage at MIT, I began. There were 5 seats reserved for you. 5 empty seats. His because divinis. My father swallowed. My mother dabbed her lower eyelid with a tissue she didn't actually need. You told me you were confused by time zones, I continued. But I heard the truth. I heard Ethan on the microphone saying, "Don't make me look bad with investors, Mom." We agreed. And then I heard you. I looked at my mother, say you didn't tell him the real date because he would be hurt if you left his event. Their eyes dropped. I took a breath, the memory washing through me without the sharp pain it once held. That was the day I knew you didn't forget me. You chose him. Ethan opened his mouth. Lena, that's not fair. And years before that, I said, cutting cleanly through his interruption, when I shared early ideas about AI infrastructure, Dad told me, no one will fund something that boring. Yet here you are, presenting a watered-down version of the exact system you mocked, hoping to secure funding for something you once dismissed. No one spoke. I leaned forward. And all those times you introduced me as your MIT daughter while never once showing up for my work, my life, or my milestones. Those choices were yours, and every one of them led us here. Ethan pushed his laptop aside, his voice cracking. We're family. We can fix this later. Just help us get this grant, and we all win together. It'll get us through Series B. We'll pay you back, Lena. This isn't personal. I stared at him. You're right. It isn't personal. Then my voice hardened, beautifully, painfully honest. It's business. And family shows up. You skipped my MIT graduation on purpose and called it business. Today, I'm making a business decision too. A quiet gasp rippled across the committee. I turned back to the board, every word sharp as glass but grounded in truth. For the record, Ethan Tech is not ready for deployment. Their model lacks safety layers. Their data sources are unverified, their infrastructure claims are exaggerated, and they have no documented plan for ethical compliance. Their technical team turnover indicates systemic internal issues. Based on current evidence, I placed my hands firmly on the table. My recommendation is reject. The chair nodded slowly. Another committee member whispered, agreed. Ethan's voice cracked into a whisper. Lena, please. This will destroy us. But the vote had already begun. One by one, hands raised. Approved, 0. Rejected, unanimous. My parents looked like the floor had vanished beneath them. But I didn't feel triumph, only truth. Only finality. When the meeting adjourned, the committee filed out, leaving the 3 of them in the room with me. My father stood first. You can't possibly understand what you've done, he said, voice trembling with anger. This company is the future of the family, your family. My future, I replied, gathering my papers. Stopped belonging to this family the day you chose investors over me. My mother stood next, reaching out as if to touch my arm. Lena, sweetheart. I stepped back. Don't call me that here. Her breath hitched. I continued, voice steady. I built my career on integrity. You built your company on image. Today, those 2 things collided. And integrity won. Ethan moved toward me, eyes wide, raw panic etched into his face. We're blood. Doesn't that mean anything? I paused. Looked him in the eye. DNA explains biology. It does not excuse behavior. The elevator dinged outside the boardroom. I walked toward it, without another word. They followed me into the hallway, whispering urgently, but I didn't slow down. When the elevator doors slid open, I stepped inside. They reached the threshold just as the doors began to close. My father's voice cracked. Lena, don't leave like this. I met their eyes one last time through the narrowing gap. My name is Dr. Ward, I said, and I am done leaving doors open for people who never walked through them. The doors shut with a soft sigh. Through the glass elevator wall, I watched the skyline rise around me, Seattle glowing with the life I had built, the life they had no part in. Below, my parents and brother grew smaller and smaller, their silhouettes shrinking until they were nothing more than distant outlines. A metaphor made literal. They were falling away. I was rising. And for the first time, I didn't look back. 3 years passed, but not quietly. My life unfolded with a steadiness I once believed was meant for other people. Seattle became home in a way Orange County never had. The gray skies, the hum of ferries, the soft drizzle on Sunday mornings, it all seeped into my bones and softened the edges of old wounds. Aurora Systems grew from a promising deep tech company into a cornerstone of urban innovation. Cities across the West Coast adopted PulseNet, our AI-powered infrastructure network. In neighborhoods once plagued by rolling blackouts, the lights stayed on. Water systems predicted leaks before they happened. Energy grids stopped collapsing during heat waves. Families who had dealt with unreliable utilities for decades finally felt stability. Reporters often asked for interviews. Investors wanted my time. Panels wanted my voice. I never sought the spotlight, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't standing behind anyone's shadow. I wasn't the background character in my own story. I was at the center of my work. And in the eyes of the people around me, I was simply seen. The Ward Fellowship flourished too. What started as a modest program for invisible innovators, students overlooked by their own families, grew into something much bigger. We funded early-stage researchers, provided mentorship, paid for equipment, lab time, travel, childcare, whatever they needed to keep building. Applicants often wrote essays that shattered me in ways I hadn't expected. My family says my ideas won't work. My brother gets all the money, but I'm the one who got into Stanford. My parents only brag about me when convenient. Every story was familiar. Every face reminded me of who I used to be. One fellow wrote, "You saw me when no one else did." I cried when I read that, quietly, the way people cry when something inside them finally exhales. Meanwhile, my personal life blossomed in a way I once believed was impossible for someone like me, someone who had grown up equating affection with currency and attention with conditions. Yet here, surrounded by friends and colleagues who valued integrity over image, I finally understood what it meant to belong without performing. I had people who would show up for me at 8 a.m. or 2 a.m., who remembered my birthday, who stayed during my failures and celebrated my wins with real joy, not competitive envy. And yes, love found its way into the quiet corners of my life. Soft, grounded, patient. My partner knew when to pull me away from my laptop. They brought me soup on nights I worked too late. They held my hand during long walks around Lake Union. We didn't rush marriage, but we built a life together that was already its own kind of commitment. For the first time, I didn't feel like a second choice. I didn't feel like a footnote. I felt chosen. As for my old family, life had been less kind. Ethan Tech collapsed after the rejected pitch. The Series B fell apart, investors withdrew, and eventually the company was sold at a fraction of its projected value. Ethan became a consultant at a mid-sized tech company, a far cry from the empire my parents had once imagined him ruling. His LinkedIn page became more modest with each passing year. My parents downsized their home. Their gala invitations dwindled, their investor brunch photos faded. Without Ethan's company to flaunt, without a daughter they could name-drop at prestige events, the carefully manufactured William family tech dynasty quietly dissolved. Their apologies came slowly, first in short, awkward emails. Then in longer letters. Real ones this time. Not performative. Not dramatic. Just simple acknowledgments of the truth they had spent decades ignoring. We should have shown up for you. You were right to walk away. We let the idea of family overshadow the people in it. We hurt you, and we know it wasn't your job to forgive us. I read every letter, folded each one, slipped them into a drawer. But I didn't reply. Forgiveness and reconnection are not the same thing. Healing and return are not synonyms. Some doors, once closed, are meant to stay closed. One evening, near the anniversary of my MIT graduation, I found myself on the rooftop of my Seattle apartment. The city spread beneath me, buildings humming with life, streetlights glowing like constellations made by human hands, traffic, a soft ribbon of motion. A breeze lifted my hair as I stood at the ledge, watching the smart grid streetlights flicker gently, lights powered and optimized by systems I helped design. For a moment, I imagined my grandmother beside me, her face lit by the city she never got to visit. I imagined her smile, that knowing one she used whenever she predicted my future better than I could. I closed my eyes and heard her voice again. If they don't see you, child, one day you'll have to change the room, not yourself. She had been right. I didn't erase the past by changing my name. I reclaimed my future. I taught myself that a name doesn't hide you. A name frees you, if you choose the right one. Ward didn't erase William. Ward built over what William abandoned. As I looked out over the shimmering city, I felt a full, quiet peace settle into me. Not triumph. Not revenge. Something gentler, a sense of alignment. Of having stitched my life back together, one deliberate choice at a time. And in that soft, steady moment, I knew how I wanted to end my story, not with bitterness, but with a question only the listener can answer. If your parents purposely forgot the biggest moment of your life so they could protect the image of the child they favored, and years later came asking you to save their future, would you go back? Or would you continue forward with the new name, the new life, and the new family you chose for yourself?